There's a cave in the Czech Republic where the walls aren't made of rock. They're made of bones. Thousands of them, arranged in neat stacks, arches, altars, chandeliers, and yes, even a coat of arms made entirely from human femurs and pelvic bones. And this isn't some obscure folk story, it's real. It's called the Sedlec Ossuary, and it might be the single most haunting place in Europe. But it didn't start as a house of bones. It started with holy dirt. Back in the 13th century, a monk returned from Jerusalem, carrying a small handful of soil. He sprinkled it over the local cemetery in Sedlec. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be buried there. Royals, priests, ordinary people with enough money to get in. Fast forward a century or two and you've got a problem. Way too many bodies. Then came the Black Death, then the Hussite Wars. The graveyard was so full they had to start exhuming bones just to make room. And that's when things got weird. A half-blind monk was tasked with stacking the bones inside the church. He didn't just stack them, he organized them, turned them into pyramids, patterns, shrines. There's even a story that he went mad doing it. But if he did, he was a meticulous madman. Centuries later, in the 1800s, a woodcarver named František Rindt was hired to renovate the place. And by renovate, I mean he bleached every single bone, cataloged the skulls, and then used them as building materials. Rindt even signed his name in bones on the wall, literally. Walking through the Sedlec Ossuary feels like standing inside a sculpture made of death itself. But it's also weirdly peaceful, like you've stepped out of time. There are more than 40,000 human skeletons in the ossuary, all used as decoration, and it's not the only one. The Capuchin crypt in Rome has chandeliers made of vertebrae. The Paris catacombs stretch for miles underneath the city, holding over 6 million skeletons. And let's not forget the Skull Chapel in Poland, which is literally wallpapered in human heads. But Sedlec makes you look at it. There's no darkness to hide the shapes, no shadows to dull the contours. The bones aren't hidden. They're exalted. Everything is out in the open, and that's what makes it so powerful. Every skull belonged to someone who once walked, spoke, sang, feared, and loved. Someone who probably had no idea their jawbone would one day support a chandelier. That's what ossuaries do. They blur the line between memory and display. In medieval Europe, death was everywhere. Plague, war, famine. Life expectancy was low, and burials were close to home. So cemeteries filled up fast. And when the ground gave out, people got creative. They didn't cremate. They curated. But Sedlec stands out because of how deliberate it is. This wasn't done out of panic. This was a vision, an aesthetic. Rindt wasn't just storing bones, he was designing with them. Some say it was a memento mori, a reminder of death's inevitability. Others think it was a power play by the church, a way to turn decay into devotion. Or maybe it was just obsession. There's something in the way the patterns spiral, the way the symmetry locks together. It feels like a puzzle solved with human remains. Even today, people visit the ossuary with awe, confusion, and sometimes unease. Because it's beautiful, but it's also wrong. We don't like to see human remains turned into decor. But back then, this was part of a cosmic order. The bones weren't just remains, they were relics, a physical connection to the divine. And the church leaned hard into that. You can see it in the symmetry, the reverence, the detail. The bones aren't just tossed around, they're placed, centered, given purpose. In that way, Sedlec is less like a tomb and more like a cathedral made of anatomy. But it's also a question. A quiet one that hums under your skin as you walk beneath the bone chandeliers. What happens to us when we die? Do we rot in silence, buried and forgotten? Or do we linger, watching as our bones become ornament for the living? We don't know who most of these skeletons belong to. The records are long gone, their names erased by time. But their bodies are still here, on display, bearing silent witness. The Sedlec Ossuary isn't haunted, not in the way movies make you think, but it is full of ghosts. Not spirits, not wraiths, but memories. Evidence. An archive of mortality arranged like art. And here's the weird part. There's something comforting about it. Like the fear of death becomes manageable when you walk through it. When you see it framed, sculpted, named, not avoided, not sanitized, just acknowledged. In a way, Sedlec is honest, brutally so. And that honesty is rare. most of us will die and vanish. But in that chapel, the dead remain. Not because they fought to be remembered, but because someone turned their bones into architecture. A cathedral of the forgotten, where every wall whispers the same thing. You were here, and you still are. And that's the thing. For all our talk of progress and preservation, very little of what we build lasts. Buildings collapse, records get lost. But bones persist. They are the last architecture our bodies leave behind. So when someone arranges 40,000 skeletons into a single structure, macabre becomes transcendent. It's design with death as the medium. It forces you to think not just about how we die, but how we're remembered, and how thin the line really is between reverence and spectacle. When does sacred become grotesque? When does memory become exhibition? The Sedlec Ossuary doesn't answer those questions. It just stares back at you while you ask them. And maybe that's the most unsettling part. Not the bones, but the way they're organized. The deliberate, almost tender attention paid to every vertebra. The skulls arranged like a rosary. It's not careless, it's calculated, which means someone made these choices, someone imagined this. And that leads to another question. How will we be remembered? In neat rows? In database entries? In photos buried on a hard drive that no one ever opens again? At least here, there's a strange kind of immortality. One built not on legacy, but on logistics. Not fame, just bone. There's also something undeniably metal about the whole thing, like a medieval death metal album cover, but real. But maybe that's the point. Death used to be a public matter, a shared experience, something not hidden behind closed doors and sterile hospital walls, but encountered daily, mourned communally, and memorialized in the open. We've sanitized death in the modern world. We hide it, we fear it. But Sedlec doesn't flinch. It leans in, and it dares you to look. So when you see photos of this place online and think that's disturbing, you're not wrong. But it's also sacred. Because there's nothing more human than leaving a mark, even if that mark is a chandelier made of ribs. I'll be covering more strange places like this soon. Let me know in the comments if there's one you want me to dig into. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss the next descent into the weird corners of history.